And coming up on this week's Green Signals, is the most innovative and important rail site in Europe coming to Wales? We visit the Global Centre of Rail Excellence to find out. CrossCountry services have been cancelled on several routes for the next 3 months, and Transport Secretary Louise Haigh is not happy and has intervened. And driver training has started on the new line out to Ashington from Newcastle. It's cost £300 million and is due to open on December the 15th. So welcome to Green Signals, your railway podcast, from me, Nigel Harris, and
from me, Richard Bowker.
Here we are again, Richard. The week's flying by between our train talks. And first of all, as routine, thank you to everyone who has left us a super thanks on YouTube this week. And they are Chris Exley, Gavin Panter, Stephen Hutton, Atlas Baudelaire, Guy B, Mark's Trains, Planes and Trams, Bob Walsh, Bill McKelvey, Rob Staffordian, Alan A.R. Pollock, the good old independent Brigline Rail Group, who always seem to be there, and Neil Bennett, who left us a very generous super thanks to buy the three of us some posh coffees. Thank you, Neil, and thank you all. We really do appreciate so many of you leaving us those super thanks, so thank you very much indeed from all three of us.
Absolutely, and we also wanted to mention listener Chris Cook, who is an audio-only listener, and he wasn't sure, because he doesn't use YouTube, how the super thanks worked. So he wanted to pass on, his thanks for the show. He also sent us some absolutely brilliant quiz ideas.
All right,
so
has he?
Oh yeah, they're really good.
Really?
They will be making an appearance at some point.
Oh, good.
Which actually just makes me think. Anybody who's not sure how Super Thanks works on YouTube, which is only where you can leave it. When you're logged into YouTube, which is free, by the way, you don't need a paid account. That's only if you want something called YouTube Premium. You'll see a thanks button next to, say, the save and share icons on YouTube. And if you click the thanks button, it allows you to choose a donation amount to leave. And it is a nice way of supporting the channel, but that's how to do it.
We do appreciate it.
Also, a very quick update on Green Signals listeners from across the globe. So Gavin Panter, who you mentioned there, gave us a super thanks, Nigel. He joins our worldwide listeners from New Zealand. He's actually now Chief Operating Officer of the Metro in Auckland. And also Whiskey Two Shots, great channel name there, who is listening from Cyprus.
Yeah, it took me a second or two for the penny to drop with Gavin, but I actually know him. He used to work for Network Rail in Peterborough. I remember watching from my desk some years ago, and there's a line-side fire right outside our office, and Gavin, having made the phone call, Gavin was one of the guys who turned up to deal with it, and I subsequently saw him in Helpston Box as he was climbing the management ladder. So good to see another expat UK railwayman really making it overseas. So well done, Gavin. Stay in touch, and we're glad you
Indeed.
love Green Signals. All great stuff, and we were rather humbled, weren't we, Richard, by just how popular, that sounds a bit odd, last week's show was, because we did wonder whether it was so detailed and that whether people would really take to it.
Yeah.
But we were wrong to be afraid, weren't we?
Well, we were blown away, actually, weren't
Yeah.
we? We thought regular listeners would be interested in a
Yes.
detailed review of West Coast Timetable, because they'd said so when we'd announced it on a previous show. I said, looking forward to that. But we hadn't anticipated how many positive comments we would get and just how interesting people would find it. So that was terrific.
Really good. So thank you for all those. And we also had this from listener Jim Millington, which I know you were intrigued by, Richard. Jim said, given the dire financial situation, how about the following as a budget and very partial alleviation of the mother of all bottlenecks on the Trent Valley, immediately south of Stafford? Electrify Nuneaton Brum, but, and here's the main point, with the Sutton Park line added, freights with electric traction can then avoid Handsacre, travelling via Portobello and Bushbury junctions. Do look at your atlases. To join the Stafford Crewe slow lines. The infill electrification involved would also improve diversion opportunities and operating flexibility generally. Always a good thing. I know there's a tight tunnel west of Nuneaton, so wiring with an adequate loading gauge may be challenging, and significant investment will also be needed to ease the pathing of additional freights through Water Orton and Park Lane junctions. However, it's still better than blindly pinning hopes on any resurrection of 2A this side of 2050. He's obviously given it some thought, Richard.
He has, and there's some wonderful knowledge there.
Yeah.
Of the network around the West Midlands, so to the north side of Birmingham. I think the point that Jim made, though, right at the beginning of that is a key one, when he says, following as a budget and very partial alleviation of the mother of all bottlenecks. And the problem with what Jim set out, it's very complex. There are quite a lot of issues. That tunnel west of Nuneaton is actually a very big issue. But the real problem with it does not make a profoundly different difference. Anyway.
It's not much of an uplift in capacity.
It's not much of an uplift. Those were the words I was looking for. Right?
Happy to help.
Thank you. It doesn't make much difference, right? Really, in terms of capacity, and I don't want to sound condescending anyway, because it's a classic sort of British railway solution. Oh, we can't have what we need, so let's sort of kind of muddle through and do a little tinker a bit there and tinker a bit there. I understand the desire to fix a problem, but the solution, I'm afraid, for the Trent Valley is either phase 2A or something called something completely different, but on the alignment of phase 2A.
Stafford diversion or whatever.
There's another bigger issue here without wanting to go off on a tangent, Nigel. Everybody is talking at the moment about fiscal rules, right? And you'll
it's
even
the
hear
buzzwords in all the time, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't think most people really understand what it is, but nonetheless, it is the buzzword time, and Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, is very exercised by it. I genuinely think there is a big difference between operating costs, spending money on just running things, and spending money on investing in capital.
Yes.
I get why we should have fiscal rules on operating costs.
That sort of thing, yeah.
But fiscal rules on nationally important infrastructure, I actually think that the economists in the Treasury are not necessarily right on this one. But
we don't just do it with railways, do we? I mean, look at the third runway for Heathrow that they've been talking about since the 60s.
That's an interesting debate about sort of climate and all the rest of it. But no, you're right. Yeah, I take your point. I mean, but capital is good.
We're world class at infrastructure procrastination, aren't we?
That's a good phrase. I like that.
I know. Well, you know me, Richard. I might be crap with numbers, but I can produce loads of words.
Oh, I couldn't possibly comment on either of those.
Anyway, green signallers, with your support and help, we will keep the pressure on to get Phase 2A back on the agenda. We are not going to give up on that. And if you missed last week's episode, please watch it, where we went into it in some considerable detail, and it taught me a lot. And it's well worth seeing the points that Richard made, because as we explained in detail, without it, the West Coast will reach capacity, at which point it will be impossible, not difficult, impossible to fix quickly if nothing has been done. And HS2's whole reason for being is really being badly undermined. Right, move on. While we're on the subject of controversial and spiky stories, let's talk about CrossCountry, shall we? They've implemented a temporary resource-led timetable, for which read cuts, for 3 months, which will see significantly reduce its services on several routes, including between Scotland and southwest England via Birmingham, Newcastle, Reading, Manchester, Bristol and Cardiff and Nottingham. So it's big stuff, really. Louise Haigh, in a letter to CrossCountry, said she had little choice but to approve the 3-month reduced timetable proposed by the operator, despite describing it separately as a dire service. Dire. Short word with a lot of meaning there. Apparently, she has required the company to agree a remedial plan which formally contractualises its proposals to improve services, and these include plans to reduce the backlog of driver training. So how about that?
Well, she went on to say some interesting things in this letter, and we've got the letter. It's public, so we'll put it on the website, so you've got a link. And here's some of the things that are specifically said in the letter. Your passengers have been suffering from a substandard service for too long, and I am determined to address this. I do not find this level of service provision acceptable, nor do I find a 3-month reduced timetable to be a satisfactory response. Put simply, the only reason I accepted your proposal was to give passengers more certainty on which services will run. And then the sort of the coup de grace, really. If you fail to deliver the remedial plan, I will not hesitate to take further action under the contract. So, pretty strong stuff.
But it's necessary, isn't it, Richard? The idea that the only way we can give passengers, customers, certainty is to reduce the service is mad.
Well, it is, but it's more complex than that. Because the way this has sort of slightly been framed in the sort of the public debate, dear CrossCountry, you're crap. You've got 3 months to sort it, and if you don't, I'm going to really get tough. Okay, so that's kind of the summary. But I think there's some big questions here. So one of the reasons why they say they need it is driver training. So who over the last 3 or 4 years has had all their fingerprints all over the industry not being able to, I suppose not over 4 years, let's say 3, resolve a long-running dispute with ASLEF over sort of driver pay conditions, rest day working, overtime, all the rest of it. So who's that? That is not just CrossCountry. Okay,
DFT.
A new contract was put in place with CrossCountry that had 21 fewer vehicles than the one they had before, because the HSTs that they did have went back or off lease or whatever. Okay, I can't believe that they took that decision on their own. We've had a very cost-driven railway, and there's nothing wrong with having a focus on cost.
No,
but we all know that when you take that number of vehicles out, you're going to have an impact on train lengths, on service, on capacity, and so on.
On reliability and everything.
Right at a time when you're trying to get people back into rail and confident again. Now, I know they've had some more vehicles since. I think some of the Avanti stuff's come off lease and has come over to them, but I don't think they've made the gap up yet. But the Department for Transport need to take a long, hard look and think, because these are not decisions that CrossCountry in isolation have made and been empowered to make on their own.
I mean, you were an operator, Richard. There's no way Virgin would have said we're going to deliver the same service to the same quality and the same standards, but with 21 fewer vehicles.
Well, operationally, no, that doesn't make sense. You're right.
It doesn't.
I suppose the only thing we weren't in the room. I don't know the detail around the CrossCountry conversations, right? And so it's probably a bit unfair, certainly of me, to speculate of who said what to whom and when and why. This has been a very cost-driven sector for the last few years, and it's almost as if the cost bit and the how do we grow the railway bit have almost happened in complete isolation from each other.
Well,
I would agree. If you thought I was stretched before, but I can still deliver a great service with 21 fewer vehicles, then no, that's not right. The guys who are leading CrossCountry at the moment, I don't think were there at the time when that decision was taken. They absolutely deserve our support and the opportunity to put this 90-day plan in and turn it around, right? But clearly, Louise Haigh has made it clear what the consequences may be if they don't. So, it's tough times.
So now on to something altogether more uplifting, thank goodness. And I have to say, I was pleasantly surprised at just how much I enjoyed this one, Richard. When I heard about the announcement of this project, I am now slightly ashamed to say I thought, what, they're going to do that there? Nah. And I was wrong. Hugely, you don't often hear me say that. I'm going to say it again. I was wrong. I thought you were going to go and end up filming a hole in the ground at Onllwyn, but it was actually rather more than that.
Indeed. So we are, of course, talking about GCRE, the Global Centre of Rail Excellence. And it was an amazing visit, Nigel. Like you, I had my eyes truly opened. One of the things that's very important to say about this is there's still a long way to go before this becomes a reality. And the guys there are very grounded and sensible about that. But hopefully this little, the visit that I had will show why there's a reason to be excited. On the day that I went to GCRE, it was absolutely glorious weather. I mean, it's just so hot. It wasn't funny. And I had the best possible view. And here's what I discovered. Modern railway equipment is complex. And that's because of very high standards of functionality, of performance, of reliability, and of course of safety. So before you introduce your new rolling stock or your new piece of infrastructure, you want to make sure it's been tested exhaustively. But how do you simulate something as complex as the railway environment without using the railway? Well, you need a test centre. And the good news is they do exist. Velim in the Czech Republic is perhaps the best known, the most comprehensive. But it's very expensive to take equipment over there. It's very expensive to bring it back. And there's a hugely long waiting list. So up until recently, we didn't have anything in the UK that could match the capability of a facility like that. But that may be about to change. I went to GCRE, the Global Centre of Rail Excellence at Onllwyn, near Neath in South Wales, to see what is planned there, and also to understand why this could genuinely be a real game changer. On the day of our visit to GCRE, the weather was glorious. And so after a short chat and a safety briefing with Simon Jones, Chief Executive, we headed out in the Land Rover to take a tour of the site. By far the best way to get a sense of the scale of what is planned. And the scale of what is planned is extraordinary. Located on the former Nant Helen open cast mine in Onllwyn, the site occupies 700 hectares. That's over 1,700 acres in old money. When complete, there will be 2 7-kilometre loops. Both loops will have 25 kV electrification with passive provision for third and fourth rail. One loop will be a high-speed rolling stock track for high-quality testing of vehicles on a continuous testing loop. It will have a maximum speed of 90 miles an hour or 144 kilometres an hour with an enhanced permissible speed of 110 miles an hour, almost 180 kilometres an hour. The second loop is for infrastructure testing with a slightly lower minimum speed of 113 kilometres an hour. It will have permission to be operational up to 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days of the year, with trains provided by GCRE that will put down 20 to 100 million gross tonnes load per annum.
So we're now at track level. We are in the centre of the track alignment, and that post that you can see on the in the middle distance is in the centre line of the track as well. So we've got to fill in this valley here, fill in that little drainage pond, carve into that bit of hillside over there, and do the same on the other side. So they were digging coal out of this mine, Richard, until the summer of 2021.
Really? As late as that?
Yeah.
Okay.
The last lump of coal left here on the coal train in the summer of 22.
One of the many impressive aspects of GCRE is the commitment to sustainability and promoting the circular economy. These track panels, for instance, were recovered from the recent track renewal project in the Severn Tunnel, something we featured in a previous Green Signals video. A tremendous example of the industry working together for the good of all. Adjacent to the track panels are a number of former Heathrow Connect Class 360 electric multiple units. I spoke to Rob Ford, Strategy and Skills Director, about what is planned for them.
So Rob,
what have we got here then? What are we actually looking at in this part of the site?
So we're looking at this part of the site. We're restoring our 360s.
Yeah.
So we've got our 3 Class 360 5-car coaches there, which when we're in operation, we'll use for putting load down on our infrastructure test loop. So they'll be used to put 20 to 100 million gross tonnes a year down on that to really test that infrastructure loop. And we've got our Line 4, which is part of the first site we've built, which is predominantly for doing training on or testing of things like our RVs. So one of the things we've been looking at today with a plant contractor is actually how we can use it to accredit and test new RVs that have been built.
Back to the Land Rover, and we're off again. Despite having driven for some time now, it soon becomes clear we still have plenty to see on the site. The scale really was now becoming very apparent.
So we're roughly around this sort of area, looking down here into the tree line.
So we've been in the vehicle for a while since we pointed out where that blue post was, and we're still only halfway across it, I suppose.
That's right, yeah.
As we continued round on the tour, I wondered why this particular site had been chosen out of what may well have been a number of candidates. After all, although the views were spectacular, it presumably wasn't chosen purely for the quality of those, as lovely as they are. I spoke with Arthur Emir, Head of Business Development and Engagement. Arthur, this is the most extraordinary location. I don't think I've seen a view like this anywhere, never mind a railway facility. How did you select this site?
Not as part of a beauty contest, even though you're correct in saying it is a stunning location. There were some pragmatic considerations. So we needed a site that was big enough to accommodate a high-speed rail circuit, 2 circuits that we're planning to build. We needed a site that we could acquire, ideally post-industrial, and this was a working coal mine until a few years ago, so it's essentially a greyfield or a brownfield site. It needed to have a railhead. It does. So there's a branch line that connects this site to Swansea and the South Wales main line. And lastly, but certainly a really important consideration, we needed to find a site where we could have the support of local communities and local authorities. And we've ticked all those boxes here, and we think it's perfect, and we're looking forward to making the place work.
That's all brilliant, but I've got to say, it's still an amazing view. How often can you see Pennyvan?
Oh, every day in South
Every
Wales.
day.
Like this.
A project such as this needs a very clear vision and a great deal of support to make that vision become reality. Time now to speak in more depth with Simon Jones, Chief Executive. What's the vision for this place? I mean, this is a project of clearly enormous scale. So what's the vision and what are you aiming to deliver here?
Primarily, this is about rebuilding local prosperity. It's about making transport better. It's about creating a net zero railway and renewing this amazing place that we've got. So those are kind of 4 mission statements, and it all sounds a bit buzzwordy, but that's what we're about. We're here to kind of create employment in an area that's been really badly affected by deindustrialization. Just over there on the other side of the ridge, Port Talbot Steelworks, where 3,000 people are about to lose their jobs later this year. This area really needs high quality, long-lasting employment. And our plans here are about creating, in the first instance, 1,100 jobs at the outset, and then that's set to grow as our plans for developing a technology park and other facilities on the site grow beyond that. But it's also about trying to help the railway industry to make transport better. So creating a facility here that just doesn't exist anywhere else in Europe. We've had so much support from people in the railway industry, from public and private sector, from politicians through to operational people, telling us that the railway desperately needs somewhere where they can go and safely innovate offline, but in an environment which looks exactly like a real railway. And that's what we're creating. The UK doesn't have anything like it. And in terms of the infrastructure test facilities that we're going to be building, Europe doesn't have that. And that's why, of the 200 organisations that have pledged to make use of GCRE in future. So many of them are now coming from Europe and further afield as well.
A little bit about sort of government then, because obviously we're here in Wales, and economic development's a really important part of the strategy. Are they supportive and helping you with this? Because presumably this meets a lot of their objectives.
Yeah, absolutely. This project would not be happening if it were not for the support of Welsh ministers, but also the UK government. I worked in Welsh government for about 8 years, and in my time there weren't that many big infrastructure projects where both the Welsh and UK governments worked hand in glove to achieve a kind of common outcome. This is one. We've had 50 million pledged to us by the Welsh government, 30 million pledged to us by the UK government, because they both can see that what we're trying to do will make a huge difference to this community here, but also to the railway industry across the UK. So there's a local focus on creating prosperity here, but there's also a national focus on giving the railway industry in the UK a leg up, the ability to be able to get products to market more quickly, to be able to make the railway better for customers.
You mentioned about the funding and the fact you've had support from the Welsh Government and from the UK Government, which is terrific. But projects like this are expensive. Something of this scale is expensive. So just give me an idea of what is the next step in terms of raising the funds for that, and what sort of level of confidence and timing have you got around that?
Yeah, so absolutely, we're in the middle of that. So despite being pledged such significant amounts of money from government, there's still a lot of money that we need to be able to get this over the line. So several £100 million more required from the private sector in order to be able to make this happen. And when we started thinking about this project back in 2017, inflation was at zero, interest rates were at zero. The UK government was buying trains like they were going out of fashion. We hadn't had COVID and the passenger numbers declining. There was a kind of spirit of optimism in the air because of HS2. All that has changed and has made the investment landscape much more difficult for us to raise the kind of money that we need. And certainly prior to July, there was uncertainty about the policy direction, frankly, when it came to railway in the UK. That feels like it's getting a bit more solid. I don't know. Time will tell, I suppose. But it'll take time for that optimism to trickle through. And those other underlying macroeconomic factors will also take time to go away. So the raising of the funding remains challenging. We have got a number of conversations which are ongoing at the moment, and we're positive about those. But as you say, it's important for us to be measured about that level of enthusiasm. We have to be realistic. What we cannot afford to do is to give hope to the communities around here that this is definitely going to happen when it might not. It's not in our control. The communities around here have had so many full storms, and as I say, with Port Talbot so close to us, what we cannot afford to do is make promises that we can't back up. We are working our socks off to try to make this happen, but it's not in our control ultimately.
I think that's a very measured approach, and you don't want to overpromise. But let's just look forward now and assume that everything goes to sort of the timescales that you hope. If we look out sort of 12, 18 months' time, just give me a sense of what the process is from here. And I suppose what people are really interested to know is, when are we going to be able to see the first train on test or the first piece of infrastructure on test here?
So assuming we can get our funding over the line later this year, which is our intention, we are aiming to get earthworks construction started in April. The earthworks are understandably seasonal. We need to do it when it's not chucking it down with rain and the ground isn't saturated. So we've got about 1.5–2 million cubic meters of material to move around the site. We want to do that during the summer months, so we can get that done between April and September, October time. And once we've created the formation, this 20-meter wide formation, 7 kilometers long, all the way around the site, then we can get on with putting down the track systems and the electrification systems. That's probably going to take us through until towards the end of 2027. So I guess we are aiming for 2027 opening for this facility, but it is absolutely contingent on us being able to nail down a funding deal by the end of this year. If we miss that April start, we are adding disproportionately more time because we have to wait for another summer season to do the earthwork.
And we know that once you've done that, you've going got an asset that will be here for years and years to come, generating wealth, providing employment and supporting the industry. That must be an amazing thing to know you could be part of.
Well, absolutely, and I think we've got a fantastic team in GCRE, and every one of us is motivated by exactly what you're describing there, Richard. We're doing this. People are giving up steady jobs in reliable employment elsewhere to come and do this with the uncertainty that I've just talked about, because they believe in what we're trying to do. They believe in the work that we're trying to do in this local community, the economic bit, but also the impact that we can make on the railway. This will make a huge difference to all sorts of businesses and to individuals.
Innovate UK is part of UK Research and Innovation and is the UK's innovation agency. A mission is to help companies grow through their development and commercialisation of new products, processes and services. On secondment to GCRE from Innovate UK is Kelvin Davis. And I asked Kelvin how GCRE fits into the vision that Innovate UK has. Kelvin, you're with Innovate UK. What's the role of that group, and particularly what are you doing here on this site?
So Innovate UK is the government's innovation agency. We support the aspirations of many government departments. And in the case of GCRE, we're supporting the Department for Business and Trade to demonstrate new ways of constructing railways in innovative ways to make them cleaner, cheaper, greener and faster.
One of the things you were telling me before was that you're a big believer in demonstration, actually seeing stuff. So what's the plan for what could we start to see being done here that follows that principle?
So it's all very well, isn't it, doing a study in a lab or in a factory, but there's nothing for the industry quite like seeing it deployed in a real environment on a railway in a facility like we will have at GCRE in the future. So at the moment we've got 14 projects setting up demonstrations of how they will build railways, how they will demonstrate those to the railway industry and how they'll sell them across the UK and worldwide.
Fantastic. And that the drone we saw earlier, presumably part of that very approach, yeah?
So drones is just one of hundreds of applications we will hope to host on the GCRE site in the future. Come back in a few months' time and we'll show you novel electrification, we'll show you novel approaches to tracking trains and a whole wealth of other applications that will contribute to the future railways.
Well, as long as you promise to bring the weather again, absolutely, we'll do that. Brilliant.
It's interesting. I've never seen a better day at GCRE. Thank you very much for bringing the weather with you.
Pleasure. As if to prove Kelvin's point perfectly, on the day of our visit, a team from DroneCloud, a company working for Network Rail on the innovative use of drone technology, were using GCRE to test their equipment in a safe and controlled environment. That's precisely what GCRE are hoping many more companies will do in the future. I spoke with Jan Domaratsky, CEO and founder of DroneCloud, to understand what testing was underway and why GCRE was the perfect location to do it. It's a very impressive piece of flying there and landing. What's the purpose behind this project here? What are you using this drone to do?
Yeah, so we're using two different types of drones. So the one you've just seen here, which is called a quadcopter or a multi-rotor, and also one that I think you've seen earlier, which is a helicopter based platform. And basically we're using both of those on a project for Network Rail to deliver them beyond visual line of sight, so effectively longer distances and on the way to autonomy and unattended operation, and basically use them for initially trespass management as part of wider incident management, but also using them then eventually for asset inspection and maintenance. So really quite a few use cases, and this environment here at the GCRE is fantastic for us because we see it effectively as a benign environment where we can test a lot of the features that will go into delivering that capability for Network Rail. We can test that here and make sure we kind of put the aircraft through their paces without having to do that over the live environment for obvious reasons.
And have they been deployed on the railway now, or is this in readiness for that?
Yeah, so no, so drones are literally humming up and down the rail network as we speak, day in, day out. So drones are really part of the fabric of the support and maintenance of the rail network today. What we're doing here is really kind of pushing the boundary to the next stage. So as I said, it's more around delivering this capability in a beyond visual line of sight capacity, because at the moment, effectively to carry out drone operations legally in the UK, you have to maintain your drone within visual line of sight, which is quite limiting. So we're working with Network Rail and the Civil Aviation Authority to really unlock that that constraint, so that we can then send the drones further and also abstract the operator, the pilot. So here we've got effectively behind us a mock-up of the in our context, the West Midlands Signalling Centre. So that's where we'll be basing our drone operation. The pilots will be completely removed, isolated from the actual, let's say, the visual operating of the aircraft. And yeah, so we're able to test all of those features required. So the network and the kind of connectivity links that are required to send those drones further. And some of the safety features. So, for example, today we've been testing geocaging, so to make sure that the aircraft doesn't go outside of its conformance boundary, effectively. So, yeah, it's it's a fantastic forum for us to be able to test that.
GCRE is a big project with a big vision. Simon and his team are passionate and enthusiastic, but they're grounded as well. They know there's still a long way to go. But with the backing of politicians locally and nationally, the support of the community, and the growing list of commitments from industry partners, both here in the UK and internationally, they may well pull it off. And then we really would have an asset to be proud of, which would be able to deliver both value to the railway, as well as the local community and regional economy in terms of long-term sustainable jobs. Perhaps then, on Llywyn in South Wales, once at the heart of the coal industry that changed the modern world, will then be at the cutting edge of technology and innovation in the railway industry. I thought I would leave it to Arthur to have the last word.
So Arthur, whereabouts are we?
We're on the outskirts of the village of Llywyn, in Cwm Dilys, the Dilys Valley, this side of the site. And what we're building in English is a global centre of rail excellence. In Welsh, Canolfan Fyd Eang Rhagoriaeth Rheilffyrdd. So, welcome to South Wales. Croeso I dde Cymru, croeso I Llywyn, a croeso i'r ganolfan.
So, you're right, Richard, about the weather. Had it been Welsh mist, it would have been not quite as impressive. But I've got a real soft spot for South Wales. I was at university in that part of the world, and the people are wonderful. And it was great to hear the guy at the end, Creso. The South Wales accent and people are wonderful. And if they can do it anywhere, they will do it there. And we wish them well. I hope your video, excellent as it is, will have the same impact on lots of other green signallers as it had on me. I thought it was great, and if it comes to pass and they get the finance and they get the momentum, that crucial momentum to get it built, it will be like a little version for the people that know it of a Pueblo in Colorado, which is the American Association of Railroads test track, which has got 2 big loops in the desert for testing, and it would be good to see. So let's wish them all well, shall we?
Absolutely. And the day I was there, of course, the guys from Drone Cloud, it hadn't been set up. They were planned to be there. They were there, as you saw, doing exactly what GCRE is set out to do. So it can be done, and be amazing if they can get it to the next stage. I agree.
What I found fascinating about the drone cloud section was we're all familiar with drones being used, but they're all used now where the operator can see them. That chap was talking about using them like they use military drones, with the pilot in a bunker somewhere and the drone miles away where you can't see it. That is a big leap, isn't it? So the Civil Aviation Authority are going to be completely in that, but hugely exciting. So well done for the vid, Richard. Another triumph for you and the Green Signals video production unit, which is you. Moving on to this week's Railway News Roundup on green signals. Trains between Birmingham New Street, Lichfield, Trent Valley and Walsall via Aston were cancelled on Friday, August the 9th after an embankment fire badly damaged power and signalling cables. The blaze was near Aston Station and meant that extensive repairs needed to be done overnight, and into the early hours of Saturday morning the line reopened later that day. The cause of the fire is unknown at the moment.
This one's an interesting one because it is one of those things that you think, is this kind of statistics and the massaging of them? Pre-cancellation, or something called P-coding data released by the ORR over the last month shows that state-run operators are actually the ones who recorded the most pre-cancellations between June the 23rd and July the 20th. Now, you might
just
be wondering,
fancy that.
What on earth is P-coding? Well, P-coding is where the Office of Rail and Road, the ORR, it's an informal term for these so-called pre-cancellations. They are cancellations which are made before the day of the train's scheduled departure. I think they can be confirmed up till 10 p.m. the night before. And if they are cancelled under the P-coding, then they're not included in the subsequent day's timetables that are used to measure railway performance statistics. Now, for about for a bit more than a year, I think about 18 months, the ORR have said, hang on a minute, I want to see the data with them and without them. So you do now see what the position is with the P-coded ones added back in as if they were cancellations. But it just, for me, it just shows you that being a state-run operator does not equate to being a reliable train operator. They're different things. And that is, good people run good railways, not necessarily public equals good railway.
That is a very good point, because the P-coding thing is usually a function of when operators know they haven't got the staff or the trains to actually run the train. But it's been feared for a while that it's been abused because they weren't used originally in those performance figures.
Yeah.
And it's important to see that context. Interestingly, there was a bit of a debate going on this on X, formerly known as Twitter, yesterday, when somebody says, well, that's a result of nationalisation because nobody involved in doing the cancellations has anything to lose as a private operator has. And there is a degree of legitimacy in the argument. But as you say, if you've got good people, it shouldn't happen. But it opens the door to that argument, doesn't it?
I think if you say nationalisation means it's going to be bad, then you're ignoring things like LNER, which do many good things. And actually, although Northern's got an issue with P-coding, they've also done some very innovative things elsewhere. So, I'm afraid, without sounding like a crack record, can we actually have GBR and run an actual railway rather than necessarily not? But anyway, we digress. We should carry on.
Please, Louise, you did talk about from day one and GBR being a direct in mind. Let's just get on with it, shall we? Network Rail has reopened the London Overground and Bakerloo lines between Euston and Watford after a £2 million upgrade. 6 days of round-the-clock work has enabled Network Rail to upgrade the unreliable equipment on the 16-mile stretch to reduce delays and create smoother journeys for those all-important passengers. They installed 32.5 kilometres of new cabling, no mention of Olympic swimming pools here, upgraded 3 kilometres of conductor rail, renewed the high-voltage power system, and upgraded track switches and crossings. Excellent. Well done, Network Rail.
Yeah, that is great. Now, this one, I'm afraid I'm just going to have to read something here because it's a bit complicated and I'll make a mess if I don't. Dave Potter, one of our listeners, sent us this one. Scotland's Railway has published a 5-year climate action plan setting out 5 priority areas, which are climate ready. I'm not sure what that means. I mean, climate change ready. Anyway, right. Climate ready, net zero, environmental managed, biodiversity, and social value. It's all good. So the idea is to create a greener, more resilient and responsible railway by tackling road emissions, heating buildings and energy purchase. They've got a target 65% reduction in emissions by 2029. Nowhere feels climate change quite like Scotland in the UK, with heavy rainfall and record-breaking heat creating real problems. So it's a really interesting action plan, this. We'll put a link to that on our website for anybody who wants to read about it.
And of course, particularly pertinent at the moment, being as we've just had the 4th anniversary of Carmont, which Indeed. Was flooding, wasn't it? This one is great. Rail Partners has launched a Kit for Kyiv campaign to fund body armour and helmets for Ukrainian rail workers travelling to the front line. British rail companies have already funded protection for over 2,500 rail workers, so well done you lot. Rail Partners says that every £20 donation will ensure one Ukrainian rail worker can be fitted with an armoured personal protective vest and helmet. The railway has played a key role since the Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022, helping to evacuate civilians in the first days of the conflict, providing a vital lifeline for grain exports following the closure of the Black Sea ports, and helping troop movements and evacuating injured personnel. The railway has been fundamentally important. But rail workers are often in dangerous areas and the last to leave territories that are under attack. Stations are often targeted by missiles and drones, so this protective equipment really does make a huge difference. The initiative is in partnership with the Global Ukraine Rail Task Force. We'll stick the link for donations on our website and in the description box on YouTube. If anyone wants to contribute, it's a really important initiative. And that's the news roundup for this week. If you'd like to send us any bits and pieces of news or any big pieces of news, you can drop us an email at news@greensignals.org. We can't promise to read them all out, but the best ones we will, and we'll always name check whoever sends us one that we read out. We're very grateful for your help. You are all part of the team.
I think we should probably move swiftly on. Shall we do the quiz?
Quiz, yay! Oh, God, I always look forward to this so much. Yeah, it's not so much the question, it's the apology for what we got wrong last time, by which I mean what you got wrong last time. So is it all okay today?
Unbelievable.
It was a very crafty question, I have to say.
It was, and I thought this is going to be great because
shifty, in fact.
That was harsh. It was a listener question actually. So from Martin Plum. So
we can blame Martin.
Nigel has just described you as shifty. All right, just there you go. And his question was a really good one. It was this.
It is.
Where in the UK can one travel on a service train that calls at 10 consecutive stations, the names of which all begin with the letter H? And the reason why it was clever, because it's on London Underground, and also because it involves going around a loop. So the answer was the Piccadilly line. And if you go around the Heathrow loop and you start at, say, Osterley, then the next 10 stations are...
Here we go.
Hounslow East, Hounslow Central, Hounslow West, Hatton Cross, Heathrow Terminals 1, 2, 3. I think it's just Heathrow Terminals 2 and 3 now, isn't it? Heathrow Terminal 4, and then back to Hatton Cross, Hounslow West, Hounslow Central, Hounslow East. So there you go, 10 consecutive stations on one service train that all begin with the letter H.
Such a fantastic pub quiz question as well.
It is. However, we had loads loads.
We didn't catch them out with that.
Unbelievable number of correct answers. But the first
and how quickly?
I think the first one was about 5 minutes or 3. Yeah. I don't know. I might not be quite right. By the time the episode had been up for a couple of hours, there were dozens. So we stuck them all into the digital random hat, and the first name out was Mark Enderby. So, Mark, if you could email us again on quiz@greensignals.org to tell us where you'd like your mug sent, then we'll get it on its way to you. I'm, again, a little bit behind on sending them out, so I've got a few more to send out, so hopefully we can get those done this week. And there we go. So well done, Mark. It was a good question.
Post office won't know what's hit them, will they?
Well, I think I took about 5 a couple of weeks ago, and they were like, what? Anyway, to this week's question. Okay, I like this. This is a railway quiz, of course. Got to remember that, right? So here we go. I think this one is quite difficult. I shouldn't even say that, should I? What is the railway connection between the numbers 44 and 61? Very
Hitchhiker's Guide.
Yeah. What's the railway connection between the numbers 44 and 61? It is absolutely a railway question. So there you go. If you think you know, either email us on quiz@greensignals.org. You can put it on YouTube, but remember, if you do it on YouTube, everybody sees it, and we then tend to get a flurry of other answers. But so that's how to let us know. You've got until midday on Saturday. This is where I will struggle because I have to work it out for 17th. So midday on Saturday, the 17th of August, to let us know.
Okay, good luck with that. Nice little bit of good news to finish on from Bob Walsh, who listens to us in Michigan in the US. Bob had noticed that driver training has begun on the Northumberland Line from Newcastle to Ashington, home of the Charlton brothers, ahead of passenger services returning to the line on December the 15th. A Class 158 DMU made the first test run along the full 28.8 kilometres line on August the 5th, and further runs are planned over the coming weeks to equip drivers with the relevant route knowledge. The line closed to passengers in 1964 and is costing £298.5 million to reopen. Is this a reopening you approve of, Richard, or are you in Victor Meldrew grump mode? Is it strategic enough for you?
Well, I'm first of all just recovering from your deep football knowledge. I think that is actually the only football fact you know, though, isn't it?
Plus the fact we won the World Cup in 1966, the last full game of football which I watched.
Right. Anyway.
So
two football facts, yeah. One of which the entire world knows. But okay, right.
Still a fact, and I know it.
What about the Ashington line? Am I approved? Yeah, I think this is a good one. You know, it's an area. There's few parts of the country where they lost their railway services, and the growth subsequently. I mean, you kind of go, they do need a rail connection. This is one, arguably, you know, the whole Mansfield and Kirby and Ash, you know, that was another one, areas that were just left without service that shouldn't have been. The problem is 300 million. I mean, I know they said it's 298.5, but that was, I suspect, just to make sure it started
less than
with
300.
a 2. It's £300 million. Now, I don't know what's actually been required to be done. I know they've had to build a load of new stations, and we know how much they cost. But it's great, and I can't wait to go and ride on this. I think this is a good thing. But it just shows you at 300 million quid, we ain't going to be doing many of these.
No, that's right. Maybe we ought to have a Green Signals outing and jolly together, Richard. It'd be good to see.
That would be fun.
It would be good to see Tobin Hughes, and it's a good. Newcastle's good, isn't it? I mean, they were very imaginative. How when the Northeastern Electrics ended, they turned the system into the metro, involving building the sort of new station under Newcastle Central and the Redheath Bridge and all the rest of it. Really well done. But you're right. As we know, stations are about 20 million each at the moment. So you don't get many.
I don't think. I think 20 million doesn't get you very much now.
Well, that's a basic double track station and a bus shelter, isn't it?
Yeah.
But yes, you're right. So there's another job for somebody in Shadow and then real GBR to really get to grips with cost-effective reopenings. Because let's remember, that railway was still there for freight, wasn't it? It's not like it's a trackbed railway that's been revived. It was there.
It was indeed.
But we think it's a good idea, and we wish them well. And we will have a Green Signals jolly, I think, up there, and have a ride out to Ashington. That'd be fun.
Good.
That'd be fun.
It will.
A couple of bottles of Brune, maybe, as well. And sadly, that's all we've got time for this week. Our train talk's over for another 7 days, Richard. Thank you to all our Green Signalers for watching or listening. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up, leave a comment if you haven't already, and subscribe to the channel. And do join us again next week when we'll be back with more exciting video packages to share with you. But for now, it's goodbye from me, and
it's goodbye from me.
Thanks a lot for joining us, as usual.